and welcome to Buffy and the Art of Story, a podcast that recaps one episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer at a time, focusing on its story elements. This time, we're looking at Season 7, Episode 13, The Killer in Me, where the gang suspects Giles might be the first. Spike's chip starts to malfunction, and Willow changes into her worst enemy. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the Awakening Supernatural Thriller series and the QC Davis Mysteries, as well as the Writing as a Second Career books for writers. Along with the recap of The Killer in Me, today we'll talk about weaving plots and subplots together, why some twists frustrate the audience, juggling recurring character relationships like Buffy's and Willow's with new story arcs like the potentials, and managing too many characters in a story. There was commentary on the DVD edition from the writer and director, so I'll be telling you about some of the highlights from that as well. As always, there will be no spoilers except in the foreshadowing section at the end. Remember, if you'd like more content from Buffy and the Art of Story, you can get all the back bonus episodes and the future ones by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly. That's patreon.com/LISA, M as in Marie, LILLY. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. The Killer in Me aired the first time on February 4, 2003. It was written by Drew Z. Greenberg and directed by David Solomon. It starts in the Summers home. Giles, wearing a coat, looking harried, asks Dawn and Buffy if they're sure they'll be okay. Buffy points out he'll only be gone 2 days. This is a great way to start with some minor conflict that brings out exposition. He asks Dawn to take Violet's notebook out to the car. She left it behind, so now we know the potentials are going with him. Then he sits down with Buffy and says he feels bad leaving her when things are in such a state of flux. Buffy tells him the trip is important for the girls to understand their power. And Giles responds, "Do you think they appreciate the gravity of what we're undertaking? It's frightening. And it's difficult." And then apparently someone told them that the vision quest consists of me driving them to the desert, doing the hokey pokey until a spooky Rastamama Slayer arrives and speaks to them in riddles. And Buffy says, "That's not exactly how I put it." A call back to Buffy's vision quest where she saw the first Slayer, and inform us that that is what Giles is doing with the potentials, taking them on a similar quest. In the commentary, the writer and director pointed out that the reason we don't see the potentials, they're already in the car, is because they had no money to pay to have them in this episode. And later on in the desert scene, they will already be in their tents. We just don't see the potentials at all. That is a good example of ways you can deal with characters who are not there, because now we are going to hear more about the potentials. Kennedy is in this episode, the others are not, but we're going to get some information about what's going on through description of a little more conflict. So we know that they're around, but the actors aren't on stage. And similarly, in a novel, you might have a very large cast of characters. Keep in mind, they don't always have to all be on stage or on the page. In the case of the novel, you can sometimes refer to them, particularly if you can do it as a group, as here when Buffy says the girls. Willow comes down the stairs now. Buffy asks how Kennedy is, and Willow says she's still sick, but Kennedy wants Buffy to meditate extra hard for her and bring back some s'mores. So now we know why Kennedy is not going. Xander walks in from outside, mentions two of the potentials, saying they're fighting over who will drive, so we get a little glimpse into what's going on with them. Buffy taunts Giles about not having renewed his California driver's license. Anya walks in as well and says someone should let Molly out of the trunk. Giles sighs and leaves. In this whole opening sequence, lots of Giles, but he does not touch anything, which has been the case in the previous episodes as well. Buffy goes down into the basement to talk to Spike. Though Buffy tries to deny it at first, they agree they are both glad that the potentials are gone. Buffy enjoys her role as mentor, but cannot wait to have 2 days with her bathroom all to herself. She sinks onto the cot next to Spike and comments about him having chained himself to the wall. She says that he's been fine near the girls. It's probably not necessary, but he says he's only been around them with her there to make sure he doesn't hurt any of them. And they talk about the need to be sure that the first cannot trigger Spike anymore. Spike starts to say something about his chip and then says, ow, and then begins writhing and yelling in pain. On the commentary, the writer and director both noted that they were very excited to start moving Spike out of being the sort of damsel in distress, which he has been for most of this season. First in the school basement, then after they found out he was killing again, being tied up, and then being dragged off by the first. And this episode begins this process. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, begins the process of moving Spike out of that role. They said they wanted to get him back to his warrior instincts. They also noted that he now has a trigger for the first, a soul, and a chip. At 3 minutes, 30 seconds, the episode goes to credits. Spike writhing in pain was the story spark for a subplot about Spike's chip malfunctioning and how to handle that. The main plot is Willow's plot, and it started very close to the beginning of the episode with Kennedy saying she's sick and staying home from this trip with the potentials, because as we'll see, she does it to spend time with Willow. When we come back from commercial, a tea kettle is whistling. Buffy joins Willow in the kitchen and says Spike is still in a lot of pain. When Willow tells her the tea is for Kennedy, Buffy says, and Willow insists it's just tea. Buffy then gets serious again and asks what Willow knows about the chip. Willow somewhat jokingly says she tried to find out way back when the initiative was around and then when it was over. But it turns out when a secret government agency puts chips in vampires' brains to modify their behavior, they don't really build websites about it. Buffy tells her that she thinks maybe this chip has been going bad for a while. It could be part of why the first was able to control Spike and get him to kill people despite the chip. In the commentary, the writer said that they really liked putting Willow and Buffy together to talk, and that has not happened for a long time because they've had fairly separate storylines. And that's one of the things that I struggle with in season 7, and as something of a carryover from season 6, because season 6 was such a hard season for all our characters, and they did not really connect with each other, especially Buffy and Willow. But really, Buffy and all her friends, Willow and Xander, weren't all that connected. It was a really rough season, and now in season 7, those issues have been worked out, but their storylines just don't give them much chance to be with one another, and instead we spend a lot of time with the potentials. I wish I had a great answer for this. It is always a challenge if you are writing any sort of series and you have your core group of characters, but you need them to have new and different adventures, so you can't always feature the relationships among them that you would like. So I can see why the writer and director both enjoyed this chance to have Willow and Buffy have this moment together. And Buffy says, "Remember when things used to be nice and boring?" And Willow says, "No." Buffy then tells her, "Have fun delivering tea." And Willow says, not when she makes it sound all dirty like that. It's just tea. But when she goes into the bedroom with the tea, she discovers Kennedy dressed and putting on her boots. Kennedy fesses up that she's not really sick. She claims she has a separate thing to do, not the trip to the desert, her own mission, and she needs Willow's help. The scene cuts to the bronze. Kennedy and Willow sit across from each other, fancy drinks in front of them. But when Willow realizes there's no mission, she starts to leave. Kennedy tells her she's sexy when she pouts. And Willow is pretty cranky, but finally agrees to stay for one drink. Kennedy suggests they start with the easy stuff and asks how long has Willow known she was gay. Willow doesn't think that's an easy question, and she asks how Kennedy knows that Willow is gay. Can Kennedy always tell by looking at someone? Kennedy comments that Willow really hasn't been out there. Then she gets a little more serious. She tells Willow it's like flirting in code, watching body language. And as she explains, she looks in Willow's eyes and talks about feeling like if you could just reach out and touch her, you just know everything will be okay. It's a very nice moment between them, and Kennedy then lightens it a little by joking, or if the other woman's really hot, you get her drunk and see if she comes on to you. Willow smiles back a little and then tells Kennedy she knew 3 years ago, and it wasn't women, it was a woman, just one. Kennedy says, lucky woman. On the DVD commentary, the writer and director talked about how being Kennedy was a thankless role. So many fans didn't like this new character coming in. I never wrote in or commented publicly, but I was one of those fans who didn't love Kennedy. They both saw her as a very different character with a different type of relationship with Willow that we're seeing grow here, and they didn't want to have a character just step into the girlfriend role who was a Tara replacement, which is something that I mentioned in earlier episodes, that I thought that might be why Kennedy had such a different personality type from Tara's. They also said they enjoyed letting Willow talk about herself in this scene because we never got that story of how she came out to her family. They also said that they wanted to show a date and romance between two women, and that a lot of TV and movies at the time, if characters were gay, they showed only difficult situations and conflicts, divorces, HIV, issues where people were fighting society, and they just wanted to show a romance, a relationship starting as you would with any couple. And I really like that, and I had not thought about that, but I'm sure it is true. So I like that they wanted to show that. The scene cuts to Buffy giving Spike a cold cloth for his nose, which is bleeding. He suggests that Chip might be going bad because he wasn't meant to last this long. Another thing he and Buffy have in common. She says they'll go into serious research mode, and Spike says, try behavior modification software throughout the ages. Buffy agrees it isn't really a book thing, but then says it's a phone thing. Spike says, who you gonna call? Buffy rolls her eyes, and he says, guess that phrase is never gonna be usable again, is it? A nice call out to the Ghostbusters movie. We're nearing 1/4 way through the episode. This is where usually we'll see the first major plot turn, though it could be more like 1/3 of the way through in a TV show. It should come from outside the protagonist, spin the story in a new direction, and raise the stakes. We don't quite have that yet, but we have a gradual build for Willow and Kennedy, because now Willow tells Kennedy her mom was proud when Willow told her she was gay, as if Willow was making a political statement, and then just sort of ignored it, and she adds that her mom hardly even met Tara. This is so what I would expect from Willow's mother. It so fits what we saw of Sheila Rosenberg in previous episodes, where she is talking about the patriarchal nature of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in King Friday, which I still love her comment, but not really noticing things about her daughter or connecting with her on a personal level. Willow then adds, Tara and I are kind of private. and then she amends to were, which is very significant, a good foreshadowing of what comes later. Meanwhile, Buffy is on the phone, so this is a turn for the Buffy Spike subplot because she tries to leave a message for Riley about Spike's chip malfunctioning. From Buffy's side of the conversation, it's clear that whoever is on the other end is acting very confused. Buffy struggles to explain and finally asks, is this actually a flower shop or is she supposed to play along and it's really secret ops? In the background, Spike is clutching his head. Buffy hangs up and says wrong number or giant government conspiracy. For a second, he looks better. He says this time it was easier, and then he screams. At about 12 minutes into the episode, Kennedy confides that it was Gone with the Wind that caused her to realize she was gay. She saw it and wanted to sweep Scarlet off her feet. Willow doesn't get why Kennedy is drawn to her. She doesn't even know Willow. And Kennedy says, have you seen you? She then points out likes they have in common, which include fighting evil. Willow points out that no, she doesn't like any of those things and doesn't really like fighting evil either. Kennedy then lists things she's noticed about Willow, like where she turns off the Moulin Rouge DVD every time and her freckles. This part for me feels a bit artificial, which is interesting because this might be a real conversation two people could have, but in fiction, we don't usually have the characters just say, hey, here's what I like about you. Here's why I want to be with you, because it's so much stronger for us to see that developing and see the chemistry between two characters and see their growing relationship and make those conclusions ourselves rather than having one character just say it. I'm not sure why we didn't sprinkle a little more of that in earlier so that we could observe it as the audience rather than having this episode where it's sort of like, hey, yes, they are attracted to each other and here's why. The reality is TV shows are written one episode at a time, and while they have a whole season arc, I'm sure it is not so easy to just weave everything in that you could possibly want. Kennedy has now told us why she is into Willow. She then adds that she is not so into magic. It seems like fairy tale crap to her, but Willow cares about it, so it's cool. This is one of the things that puts me off about Kennedy because she has already seen that magic is real. It's not fairy tale crap. And yet she says this to Willow, knowing how important it is to Willow. And even though she walks it back and says, oh, but you care about it, so it's cool. That's like saying, hey, but I still really think it's crap. Willow, though, apparently is not bothered because the scene cuts to the two of them at Willow's room. It's an end of the date, but a little bit awkward, probably because they are staying in that same room. And of course, because it is their first time out together, Willow still is not all that comfortable. She seems uncertain, though they both say how glad they are that they talked. Kennedy says she needs to be honest about something. She steps closer and closer to Willow and says she thinks Willow should know and then kisses her. You could see the shift to Willow and Kennedy becoming closer, clearly moving toward becoming involved as a turn in the story, because we shift from Kennedy just trying to get Willow to come out with her to some real sharing and growing closeness. There is, however, a truly major turn now because as they kiss, the camera circles them. We close up on Willow and then Kennedy and Willow and then return to Kennedy. And at that moment, we can't really see Willow and we hear a man's voice, Warren's voice, say, well, that's nice. Kennedy jumps back, almost slams into the dresser, and the camera pans to show us why she is so shocked. It's not just the voice. Warren is standing there. So this is the real turn from outside of Willow, completely spins the story, and it raises the stakes because who knows what this means, but it cannot be good. This is the character who killed Tara. And we go to a commercial, so it is also a great hook. I I am so excited to share with you that my latest novel in my QC Davis crime novel series is going to be released on Wednesday, October 9th. You can pre-order the ebook now or order the paperback at lisalilly.com/skeptical. And that's because it is The Skeptical Man. And here's what it's about. In the mesmerizing world of magic and illusion, lawyer and private investigator Quill C. Davis finds herself entangled in a puzzling murder case. Her task: solve the murder of her dear friend's husband, a renowned magician with a complicated past. The victim, Randall Petrov, recently distanced himself from his family's business and devoted his energy to a noble cause, a nonprofit that brought the magic of hope to hospitalized children. But in doing so, he stirred up a hornet's nest of trouble, uncovering corruption and fraud in the organization. Additionally, Petrov conducted a daring sting operation that unmasked a fraudulent psychic who preyed upon vulnerable parents seeking solace. Suspicion falls, too, upon his brother, set to inherit the family business. Quill delves into the investigation, navigating not only the streets of Chicago, but a mystical European city. Her pursuit of justice comes at a great cost, as she finds herself the target of deadly attempts on her life. Quill faces internal turmoil as well, haunted by the recent resolution of her sister's decades-old murder. Quill knows firsthand that justice does not always bring closure and healing, especially when it comes to her strained relationship with her parents. Complicating matters is her long-distance boyfriend. Uncertainty over his return to Chicago leaves Quill torn between loyalty and the allure of an attractive and intelligent musician who aided her in a past investigation. The Skeptical Man is a riveting mystery that takes readers through an intricate world of magic, family secrets, and personal redemption. Will Quill uncover the truth behind Randall Petrov's murder, unearth the sinister corruption plaguing the nonprofit, and ultimately find the solace she seeks, or will she fall prey to the same killer who ended Petrov's life? Get your copy today and uncover the truth behind the illusions. That's The Skeptical Man at lisalilly.com/skeptical. Throughout the episode, sometimes we'll see Willow saying lines, and it's Willow, sometimes it's Warren, mainly depending on whose point of view. If we're more invested in Willow's point of view, we're seeing Willow, because that is how Willow sees herself. When someone else is taking in what Willow is saying, we typically see Warren. And on the commentary, the director said they shot every single Willow line and every single angle, showing if it was like looking over Willow's shoulder, with both actors. So it really extended the shooting time because they were doubling everything. On return from commercial, Willow, looking like herself, asks if Kennedy's okay. Kennedy looks appalled. And we see Warren again. Willow finally checks the mirror, and now she's appalled. Kennedy asks what it is. Willow says, "It's the man that I killed." They go downstairs. Xander sees Warren and thinks the first is back. So does Anya, and she is no way going to buy the claim that this is Willow. John mostly looks puzzled, so maybe she's a little more willing to entertain it. Warren again says she's Willow. Ask Kennedy, but Kennedy is not so sure. Andrew walks in, sees Warren, and drops his plate. This scene with so many characters took 14 hours to film because of all the double shooting they had to do. Andrew says he's not listening to the first or any promises about demigods and dancing. It won't work on him now. Buffy now comes into the room and she punches Warren and then is shocked that it worked and it hurt her hand, which is kind of funny that Buffy's first thought is to punch the first when she knows that would do absolutely nothing to the first. But I buy it because she's the Slayer and that is her instinct. Andrew thinks it really is Warren come back from the dead, and he embraces him and ends up with his hands on Warren's chest. Willow yells at him, "No touching." There's lots of confusion. Kennedy, though, has heard enough now and finally says, yes, it is Willow. Xander asks, is she's sure. And Willow turns to him and says, there are other stories from kindergarten, non-yellow crayon stories, in which you don't come out in such a good light. An incident involving Aquaman underoos, for example. Want me to start talking? And Xander says, hey, Willow. They're all confused about it. Willow claims it just happened, but says she might have brought it on herself, her witchy subconscious making things go kerflooey, and reminds them about that subconscious we can't see each other spell. But Buffy asks why would she turn into Warren? Willow claims it's because she feels bad about killing him, but we get the feeling she knows there must be something more to it. And she does not mention that she and Kennedy kissed right before it happened. I'm not sure the first time I watched whether I noticed that, but it's significant that Willow is not willing to mention that. Willow insists she'll deal with this on her own. She doesn't need help. She did it. She'll fix it. And she doesn't want them to see her this way anyway. She also points out Buffy's hands are full, noting Spike on the ground moaning. I'm not quite sure where he was before when everyone was coming down the stairs. But they notice him now, and he says he doesn't think that they can wait to see if the initiative will return the call or send help. The scene cuts to the street. Willow has gone out on her own, but Kennedy found her and confronts her. She wants to help. She also tries to get Willow to see the humor, but Willow doesn't quite get the chuckles. And she tells Kennedy she is going to get help now to try reversing it. She already tried to do it alone, but something is blocking her. So a little bit of time has passed here. Kennedy tells her all the more reason Kennedy should go with. She was there when it happened. Willow tells her to try not to get in the way, sounding more and more like Warren. She adds that she's going to see some old friends. It's been a while, but maybe they'll be able to help. And in a bit of parallel storytelling in the woods, Spike and Buffy are going back to see not exactly old friends, although I guess Riley would count as that, but back to the people, or at least the place where Spike got his chip. They're in the woods. They find a partly hidden trap door, uncover it, and talk about whether there might be initiative files with information or some types of treatment down there. But when they get in, Spike by falling through down onto the concrete floor below, the entire place is dark. There's no lights. It's full of overgrown branches and dirt. At about 20 minutes, 22 seconds into the episode, which is just short of halfway through, the phone rings at the Summers house. Andrew answers, then turns to the others and asks if they know a British guy named Robeson. The scene cuts to Xander hanging up. He says Robeson was attacked. Giles was there helping. There was a bringer. Robeson blacked out, and the last thing he remembers is the bringer's sharp axe swinging at Giles's head. Anya says Giles never mentioned any of this. I'm assuming they put that line in there because the audience would be thinking, yeah, hey, why did Giles not mention that if he's not the first? It bugs me because we will find out in this episode Giles is not the first, and I cannot think of any reason Giles would never have mentioned this. I suppose it's possible he told Buffy and not everybody, and she didn't see any particular reason to pass it on. I guess you can think with all the potential showing up and everything going on that he didn't, but it still feels like many things with this maybe Giles is the first storyline artificial. Xander goes on that Robeson came too, and there was no Giles. So they all say, well, maybe Giles didn't want to talk about it, but Anya points out he could be the first. And if you want to infiltrate the Slayer's inner circle, become who she trusts the most. Andrew then tells them the first can't be corporeal. I think they knew that, so he tells them or reminds them it can't touch anything. All of them try to think and think hard about whether they saw Giles touch anything, hold anything, did anyone hug him, and they all get up together to go find the potentials in Giles. On the DVD commentary, the director and writer joked about what Giles only ate in the middle of the night, so no one saw him eat. He never brushed his teeth. Again, exactly what bugs me about it. Maybe it would have worked better if somebody said, well, someone must have seen him eat something. And then someone else is like, I don't remember every time someone eats, because I could kind of see that. We've all done something on autopilot. Maybe you pour your coffee and walk away and can't remember if you poured your cup of coffee. So it could be the same kind of thing. You don't notice if the people around you are eating breakfast, especially with that many people in the house. But it is a real strain to believe that somehow Giles never touched anything in front of anyone, and he was the real Giles. Andrew is all set to go with them on the road trip to find the potentials, and they tell him no, and Andrew says, what? Why? Because I used to be evil? Xander responds, no, because you're annoying, but that's a good reason too. Andrew protests, wait, don't leave me here alone. I keep getting attacked in this house. What if this is all part of the plan? Drive you guys away so it can have its way with me. Ever think of that? But Xander says, I'll risk it. Andrew responds, okay, well, if you leave me here alone, I'll do something evil like burning something or gluing things together. And Anya says, for crying out loud, Harris, let's just take him. At least we can keep an eye on him. This was a fun Andrew sequence. I love that he compares gluing things together to doing something evil. I see that moment, everyone going out to look for Giles, as a sort of midpoint in this Giles / the first subplot. It's a very small subplot. There isn't a huge amount to it. Giles takes off. Everyone realizes, ooh, maybe he is the first because of the call from Robeson. Then they make this commitment to go out and find him. And in the next scene, Giles is sitting by the fire alone. We don't see the potentials anywhere. It's night. He looks very serious and ominous. And then we're going to finish this up later. For now, the scene cuts to a group of college women in a circle holding hands, candles lit. Willow / Warren comes in the door and says, this is new. This startles the group, and the leader, whose name is Vaughn, which I only know from the commentary, I'm not sure it was said in the episode, wants to know what's going on. Willow tells her they met when Willow was a freshman and also not a boy. And she introduces Kennedy and comments that there have been a lot of changes to the campus Wiccan group and adds, I guess you got past the whole bake sale phase. But Vaughn says, no, they still do the bake sales. And she's still confused about this whole being a man thing. But Amy, who we didn't notice before, she was kind of hidden behind someone else, stands and says, it's Willow, she can tell. Warren looks upset to see her because Willow is not thrilled, I'm sure, and Amy tells her she knows she's kind of screwed up. Willow already knew that because she lived it, and Vaughn jumps in to say Amy's doing much better. Amy tells Warren / Willow she hit rock bottom and wanted to find Willow and say she's working on things with the group and she's sorry. But now here Willow is looking like, and Amy then says, how did this happen? Willow asks Amy and the group for help, and they agree, though it isn't quite their thing. Amy and Warren hold hands. Amy chants the spell, but something hurts Warren, and Amy says it didn't work, and Warren says, no, it didn't, you dumb bitch, and punches her. Willow is really upset, says it wasn't her, it was Warren, and we cut to commercial. That's about 26 minutes, 22 seconds in. This is late in the episode, but I see this as the midpoint. This is a serious reversal for Willow. Certainly turning into Warren was one as well. That was the first major turn. But here, this is where we see she isn't just looking like Warren. And her sort of rude comments before could be understood as being Willow very stressed, very upset and worried. But punching Amy, calling her a dumb bitch, this is Warren. She is becoming Warren. Willow stalks off, Kennedy follows, and Warren yells at her and says this isn't a glamour, because before they talked about it being a glamour where she just is looking like Warren. But Willow says she's turning into Warren, a murderous, misogynist man, and in case Kennedy hasn't noticed, their little date is over. Kennedy still tries to follow, but Willow throws that spell back where it basically creates a force field that pushes Kennedy back. In the initiative underground, Buffy and Spike find skeletons of demons everywhere. The initiative just sealed up the place with all the dead bodies in it. Spike sees a door with a small window. There's a red light shining through. It's the only light they've seen, and he thinks it's the way to the medical lab. They go in, but they keep hearing noises, like there's some other creatures there. The scene cuts to the car. Andrew wants to play car games. He's sitting in the back. Anya asks how long since Giles left. Xander says a few hours, and they all worry about what they're going to find and worry that the first knows they're coming and they're heading out there, as Anya says, with a teenager, a powerless former demon, and two big geeks. Andrew suggests they play the license plate game. Willow stalks through the streets alone, and then she stops and she slumps against a wall and just cries. Then, as Warren taunts herself for crying like a little girl, gets an idea and hurries off. The scene cuts back to Buffy and Spike, and they agree that something might have survived here. They're trying to figure out where the noises are coming from as they shine their flashlights around. Something attacks, knocks Buffy down, and knocks her flashlight away. Back in the classroom, Kennedy returns. Only Amy is left cleaning up. She says everyone else left. It was too creepy. Amy tells Kennedy Willow will be fine. She's strong, she's good at this, she's dealt with a lot worse, long before she found herself a potential Slayer bodyguard. Kennedy responds that she never said she was a potential Slayer and asks how Amy knew who she was, and Amy says, oops. The scene cuts back to Buffy and Spike fighting, but his chip malfunctions, Spike goes down, and the demon starts dragging him off. Notice how, as we cut from scene to scene, there is always something vital that happens. It's revealed that Amy slipped by saying Kennedy was a potential Slayer, so she knows something more about what's going on. Spike and Buffy fight. Spike gets dragged off, and then we cut again, this time to Willow at a gun shop. This is one way to keep the tension high when you are jumping between a few storylines. Earlier in the car, we cut when Anya says, what are they going to find? And all they're bringing, no Slayer, no powerful witch, just the four of them. So upping the tension and cutting. We're a little over 3/4 through the episode, and we get the last major plot turn now at 32 minutes in the main plot. So we had a very early story spark, a somewhat late first major turn, and late midpoint, and now this last major turn. So it's a little bit more of a compressed major plot, other than that story spark starting so early. And it fits that these turns would be moved around a little bit because we do have a pretty strong subplot with Buffy and Spike. It takes up a lot of the episode, plus we have that very minor story arc with Giles. This is a very major shift with Willow in the gun shop. It does what it should do. It grows out of the midpoint where Willow started clearly becoming Warren and realizing she was becoming Warren as a person, not just looking like him. So it comes from that because she's in the gun shop where Warren bought the gun he killed Tara with. And it takes the story in another new direction. Now there is clear danger Warren/Willow is posing, and it ratchets up the stakes tremendously, calling back to that horrible day when Warren shot both Tara and Buffy. The owner asks if Warren wants the same model as last time and asks how it worked out for him, and Willow says, "You'd be amazed." And we cut to a commercial, a great hook. On return from the commercial, we see Giles again at the fire. The gang tackles him, and they are all relieved that they can feel him. Giles is a bit put off by all that feeling, but he says he's sure there's some reasonable explanation. On the commentary, I couldn't tell if it was the writer or the director, but one of them said, "And thus ends the 5-episode joke." That is how I feel about this whole "is Giles the first" thing. I imagine it was fun to think about in the writer's room, maybe for the directors as well, but to me, it just took up space. It made Giles feel very artificial. It made everything seem awkward because we didn't see Giles hug anyone. We didn't see any real closeness. It feels like a lot of energy and time for what is essentially maybe not a joke, but a surprise twist for the audience. First, maybe he is the first and then he's not. And this is what I mentioned early on, what kind of twist frustrates the audience. Now you can tell me, I would love to hear, email me at buffystorypod@gmail.com and tell me maybe you really enjoyed this. To me, it was a frustrating twist because it felt like it didn't quite play fair because there's no explanation for why Giles didn't hug anyone. There's no explanation for why nobody saw him touch anything. When we find out it's really Giles, just doesn't quite work when you look back. And it's frustrating because we didn't get enough time this season so far with Buffy and Willow having moments together. There are lots of things that are left undeveloped or not touched on for our core characters, and yet we're spending time on this. Now Giles says a line that really does not age well. He says, "Now wait a minute, you think I'm evil if I bring a group of girls on a camping trip and don't touch them?" When this aired, I feel like there was not as much public understanding of how real a situation that is. I do not think that line would be in the episode today. The scene cuts to Buffy again. She is calling out for Spike, and the only light in these scenes, other than that red light in the one scene, for the most part, it is completely dark, and the only light comes from the flashlights. Buffy has gotten hers back. She's calling out for Spike. A demon jumps out, throws her down. She fights it and kills it. It's a great fight sequence, partly because we can only see parts of it, which kind of make it more exciting. She finally finds Spike lying there. She's afraid that he's not going to make it, but suddenly all the lights go on, and there are these soldiers in camouflage. They're up in this raised area, a big group of them, and one of them says that Agent Finn said she tried to contact him and they have orders to provide anything she needs to help Assface here. And Buffy looks taken aback and he tells her that was Agent Finn's exact words. I said last time that I was planning to go to the Buffy Immersive Experience here in Chicago, and I did go. It was a lot of fun, maybe not quite as interactive as it was originally advertised. There was no stake or axe throwing, which on reflection is probably good because you probably don't want a bunch of people drinking and throwing stakes around. Terrific scenery though. There is a bar that has a sign like the Bronze. There's a small section that looks like the library. There's a little Sunnydale High trophy case. There's a lofted area that is the magic box, and they do have a tarot reader there. At least they did when I went with two of my friends and fellow Buffy fans. And there's a rooftop graveyard. It is a great place to hang out, spend a little time with your friends who love Buffy. So if you Google it, just look for Buffy Immersive Exhibit and Chicago, and you should find that without any trouble. If you go, I would love to hear how you liked it. The scene cuts to Willow with a gun stalking through the street. So again, we have that moment. That is a surprise that I did enjoy. We built up to it. Maybe not quite clear why it took them so long to turn on the lights, but they're up at this upper level. Perhaps they all just got in, put on the lights, and it's fun to see, oh, hey, initiative guys again. And then we cut to Willow. So there's plenty of tension. What is going to happen now? Then Willow with her gun, very ominous, then back to Buffy. So this is starting the climax of Buffy's plot. Willow with a gun, stalking somewhere, starting the climax of her plot. Buffy looks at Spike. He's on that stretcher, and the leader tells her the chip has degraded. So some time has passed. They have looked into what's going on. It is degraded, and something has to be done right now. Finn said it was Buffy's call, that all decisions about Hostile 17 were up to her. They can repair the chip or they can remove it. Buffy blinks, looking thoughtful, but we don't get to see her answer, and we cut to Amy. A great way to keep the tension going, because in this scene, we're basically going to get an explanation, some exposition from Amy. We definitely want to know, so there's plenty to keep us engaged. But even if there weren't, we have that what's Buffy gonna do? Where is Willow going? All of that out there to keep us on the edge of our seats. Kennedy demands to know why Amy did this. Amy uses magic to fling Kennedy across the room. I have a note, oh, not so fairy tale after all. Kennedy, magic is real. Amy then says she did a standard penance malediction. Kennedy asks why Warren and why after she and Willow kissed. Amy laughs and says, that's rich. Kennedy must be good. It must have been some kiss. And finally says the hex that she cast lets the victim's subconscious pick the punishment. And it's always better than whatever Amy could come up with. Unlike the Giles twist, this really fits what came before. Willow said maybe she did it subconsciously, and it turns out in a way she did. She didn't cause it, but it is drawing on her subconscious, and we have established earlier in the season that Willow's subconscious, because of all her feelings, sometimes does very dangerous things with magic or prompts her to do it and she doesn't even know it. So this really does fit, and yet it's a twist. First that Amy did it, and then that she cast a hex to essentially make Willow do something. Kennedy doesn't see why Amy hates Willow so much, and Amy insists it's not about hate, it's about power. Power came so easily to Willow long before she knew what to do with it. Everyone else had to work twice as hard to be half as good, but no one cares how hard you work. Everyone only cared about cute, sweet Willow. Quote, they don't know how weak she is, end quote. The cute, sweet Willow and everyone only cares about her reminded me a bit of Faith to Buffy, that Faith felt like she came to town, she's a slayer too, she stakes the vampires, she protects people, and everybody thinks Buffy. Everyone only cares about Buffy. And I like that there is that resonance there with that storyline, and I believe that Amy feels that way. As far as how weak Willow is, I wasn't quite sure what she meant, but then she said Willow gave in to evil and did much worse things than Amy. She almost destroyed the world, but everyone keeps on loving her. That, I guess, is what she sees as weak. Willow is weak, gave into this evil, and yet everyone still admires her, cares about her. And on the DVD, the writer and director said, yeah, looking back, Amy's right. Willow did try to destroy the world. And it's kind of interesting to me to have Amy point out something that is somewhat problematic. It does seem like in other circumstances, Buffy might see Willow as too dangerous to, I mean, she wouldn't kill her because she's human, but too dangerous to be out there fighting with them again. Willow kind of sees herself that way, but because she's Buffy's friend and Buffy really needs the help, and Giles thinks it's a good idea, Willow is there. You can kind of see why this would frustrate Amy. And if Amy weren't herself doing evil, I would have some empathy for her on that. But she clearly likes causing chaos, and she doesn't care what Warren might do. She says, what's wrong with having a little fun? It's just a game. It's not Amy's fault if Willow is losing herself. And Amy then insists she's not the bad guy, but she wonders where he'd be about now. And she snaps her fingers. There's a flash, and Kennedy is standing in the Summers yard. This is the main plot climax that we're coming to, where the opposing forces have their final confrontation. and resolve the conflict. Warren/Willow stalks in with a gun and says, "You think you can just do that to me, that I'd let you get away with that?" Kennedy is confused. Willow points the gun at her, says she made it happen. Willow, made it happen and she'll make it stop, and then says, "I killed her." Kennedy says, "You mean him?" And Willow says, "Her, him, you know what I mean." A very significant slip, because Willow is meaning to say that she killed Warren. That's what she's been telling herself and others. This happened because she feels guilty over killing Warren, but it turns out she feels guilty over Tara. And when she says, "You know what I mean," the two of them start talking, and Kennedy points out that Willow said Kennedy was there, and Kennedy keeps asking who Willow killed, and Willow says it was Kennedy's fault. Kennedy tricked her, got her to forget, and Kennedy says Tara as she realizes what is going on with Willow. And Willow says Kennedy does not get to say Tara's name, and Willow then is really losing it, says she doesn't mean what she's saying, but she can't hold on. Warren is winning. Willow says she's being punished and that just for a second she let Tara go. She didn't mean to, but she let her go. And then Willow insists Tara is with her and they should have been forever, and Willow let her be dead. And then she says she's really dead and I killed her. This is an echo of Willow in the beginning of season 6, when that last chance at bringing Buffy back, Willow thinks it's gone. The urn of Osiris is smashed, and Willow realizes she can't bring Buffy back, and she says something very similar. She's really dead. She's really gone. And this really fits with Willow's challenges dealing with grief. And we thought that she had dealt with it. She had that horrible time at the end of season 6. She became Dark Willow, all these things to avoid all this grief and pain. She goes through the summer with a coven. She's been working through things, but I completely buy that this moment with Kennedy, just maybe this whole evening when she allowed herself to have fun with someone else, when she kissed Kennedy and for just a second let go of Tara, acted as if Tara was dead, that this is devastating for her. And she falls to her knees and begs Tara to come back and cries. Kennedy kneels on the ground near her, says Willow didn't do anything wrong. And on the DVD, the writer said he hoped that it came through that Willow felt she betrayed Tara by kissing Kennedy, so she turned herself into the person who killed Tara. On the first watch, I'm not sure I processed all of that fast enough. Certainly when I thought about it, I got it. But it did really make sense to me. What didn't make sense to me until I watched it this time for the podcast is why what Kennedy does now works. So after Kennedy says Willow didn't do anything wrong and it's just magic, Kennedy says she thinks she figured it out. Magic is just fairy tales. And Kennedy kisses Willow. The camera circles them again as it did before. We see Warren. So Kennedy is kissing Warren, but then at the end it is Willow. That is the resolution. Kennedy has brought Willow back, and Kennedy says, I am good, calling back to what Amy said earlier. And Willow is thrilled to be back, still unsettled, not sure if she's all right, but Kennedy helps her into the house. Willow says she is so tired, and Kennedy says she'll make her some tea. Calling back to the first thing, one of the first things we saw with Willow making Kennedy the tea. So why did that work? It always felt really arbitrary to me. I could not see why Kennedy thought that would work and why the kiss brought Willow back. I'm thinking it is grounded in this idea of fairy tales, maybe Kennedy grasping that magic is real, maybe fairy tales are powerful, and if a kiss began this, a kiss could fix it, especially given that Willow has now gone through what she needed, which was to accept that, yes, it is okay to move on. I think she had accepted Tara was dead before, but in her heart just kept her close. She wasn't ready to let go and to let herself move on. And so she kind of gets there, although she's crying and begging Tara to come back. She also said she's really dead, although she followed it up with, I killed her. And I think that's why I have a little trouble, because Willow didn't quite reach that place, but maybe the idea is Kennedy kissing her again now that she has talked through this, that the subconscious has become conscious. Now they can repeat this experience and it is okay. Willow can feel all the feelings, the sadness, the loss, but also this new relationship starting with Kennedy, or these new feelings and new moments. So it is kind of a fairy tale thing. I've got to say, it still doesn't work great for me. That is another thing I would love to hear what you think, if that worked better for anyone else. We do not get an answer about Buffy and Spike. We don't know what Buffy decided to do because the episode is over. So that is it, other than foreshadowing and spoilers. If you find the way I talk about story structure helpful and you want to try it for your own writing, you can download free story structure worksheets at writingasasecondcareer.com/worksheets. If you're not sticking around for foreshadowing and spoilers, thank you so much for listening, and a special thank you to patrons who support the podcast and get bonus episodes. Come back in 2 weeks, though, for a bonus episode for everyone. Very appropriate to this point in the season where Willow has struggled with her grief, because this will be about how grief is addressed in the Buffyverse. It is a conversation between me and author Tiffany Nieheiser, and I can't wait to share it with you. And we are back for foreshadowing, which does include spoilers. On the DVD commentary, when they talked about Spike's chip and moving him away from being the damsel in distress, the director and writer saw this episode as pivotal, and it's right near the middle of the season, and they said that was appropriate because this is what starts getting rid of the chip. Spike's chip, Buffy will tell them to take it out, and that moves Spike into becoming a fighter again. And they noted that in this episode, I should have said it earlier, he does fight side by side with Buffy, and we have not seen that for a long time. They are together, fighting demons together, before the chip takes him down again. When they were talking on the commentary about Spike having a chip, a trigger, and a soul, it made me think of a future scene where Giles and Buffy are trying to explain to Robin, who eventually they discover is an ally, what the deal is with Spike, and he gets very confused about the chip and the trigger, and he says something like, because the military gave him a soul, and Buffy and Giles are just like, forget it, this isn't going to work. So some foreshadowing in here of Spike becoming a fighter again, getting rid of that chip because of that scene, with them in the initiative working together. It is quite the cliffhanger to leave us on. It will be a significant source of conflict, though, going forward. Giles does not think taking out the chip was the right call, and the potentials aren't so sure either, which I can understand. They do not have the long history between Buffy and Spike. They didn't see Spike gradually change. They did not see how, even before the soul, he was helping Buffy. All they know is he was recently killing a bunch of people. Another thing that is foreshadowing here is when Andrew tells Warren, who he thinks is the first, that his promises of being demigods and dancing in fields aren't going to work. In the episode Storyteller, which is all about Andrew facing up to his guilt, we'll see an actual scene of what Andrew thought it was going to be like, with the geek trio running through a field and being like gods. This episode is the last that we see of Amy. I love that she got to come back for an episode, because she was in The Witch, the third Buffy episode. And I think it's so wonderful to get to see her again and finish out this arc. And it makes sense that it would be in the context of how she feels about Willow's power. We saw some of her anger at Willow the last time she was in the show, when she was angry that Willow stopped doing magic and told her to stay away. And Willow had said, if you're my friend, you'll stay away. And if you're not my friend, you better stay away. And this is clear. Amy is not her friend. Might have been nice to see something better for Amy, but I did just like to see her again in whatever form. The biggest foreshadowing, though, here is Willow's continuing doubts about whether she can control her magic, because yes, Kennedy brings her back, but this could have been a disaster. She was very close to shooting Kennedy. And this really sets up why, as we go forward in the season, they still can't just turn to Willow and be like, hey, can you do a spell? And why Buffy is so distraught. And there's the episode with the Shadow Men where she just dives into this, basically a portal to she doesn't know where, she doesn't know how she's going to get back. She tells them all just to get her back. And Willow's going to have to do that spell, and it's very scary for Willow to, one, figure out the spell. It's hard for her to even get started, then to do it. And Buffy is desperate because she has this powerful witch who is afraid to use her magic, understandably so, but Buffy can understand it, but that doesn't help Buffy. She doesn't know what she's going to do. Even in the very last episodes, Willow is not sure about whether she can do that spell to share Buffy's power with all the potential. So that creates suspense there. What is going to happen? Is it all going to work? And if we didn't see this with things so very nearly going horribly, horribly wrong, we wouldn't feel as much suspense about any of that because Willow is so powerful. So it's a good way to make sure that we're not just thinking, well, Willow can just handle this. The we can't see each other spell was bad enough. Willow almost got killed because of it. And Dawn was in danger, but here Willow herself almost killed someone. So great setup for the rest of the season. That's it for the episode. Thank you again for listening. Come back in 2 weeks for the bonus episode about how the Buffyverse handles grief with Tiffany Nieheiser, author of Not Dead Enough. You can find back episodes of Buffy and the Art of Story, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction at lisalily.com. To support the podcast, hear extra bonus content, and get each regular episode a few days early, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLilly. That's Lisa, M as in Marie, Lilly. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman, LLC. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.